Hello, everybody. It is Thursday, so welcome back to Reconnected. And this week, I don't even know how to intro this. I'm flabbergasted that Howard said yes. Honored that you're here. Mr. Howard S. Berger is our esteemed guest tonight. Howard, thank you for doing this.
Oh, are you kidding?
I am. I'm very, very
No,
sincere.
I appreciate it. It's wonderful. Thank you. It's great to be here.
This is wild. Like, you are one of the people that I've just respected and loved talking to the most throughout this entire run. So it's like surreal.
Oh, you.
Well, and
right back.
Do I remember right? Is this your first live thing that you've done?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. if I stay alive, yeah. Oh, you mean live? Like, I mean like breathing. I think so. Yeah.
Live meaning we have a bunch of people watching us already, and we got certain people like we got Mr. Flickering Waves who says, "Hello, Ryan, Howard, and chat. Enjoyed the interview with Ryan and Howard. Looking forward to tonight's discussion." We got some people excited about 1971. We're going to be talking about that after we go through all the announcements. And to sort of lead into that, you mentioned 1971, and I was like, I love the 70s, but I feel like this is going to be easy to get a top 5. This was one of the hardest lists I have ever made for this show. I literally have 15 right now, and I feel like it's going to be in flux until we actually start.
No, nobody's done 1971 yet.
Nope, and we've only done maybe one other year. In fact, we may not have even done one of the years yet.
Oh, okay.
That's always like the backup idea, and people always view it as a little difficult to approach as a topic.
Not for me. That's my whole life. That's how I know. That's how I remember my life is through the years of films that I saw.
Right.
No, I mean, it's a crazy idea anyway. But I mean, like for me, honestly, every year has something amazing to it. There's something, there's always something great. But it just in terms of me, I'm just so rooted in my childhood that I remember things in terms of like the summer, like if the summer was broiling, baking, and someone in my family would take either the whole family would go see something, or it would be like my grandmother and my mom. So that's like for me, that's what I remember. I remember the movies. Either I saw it on TV or if I saw them in the theater. So that's like for sure. I know you throw a name at me, a year at me, and I'll know where I was. I may not remember exactly how old I am because I was born in December, so I keep forgetting that whether I'm like a year younger or a year older. I don't think So I may get my age wrong by a year, give or take. But usually for me, from like 1967 to 73. I could almost say is like that's for me the big formative thing. But I remember seeing stuff on my parents' laps when I was I discussed this when I was like a postnatal. So I really but those years 67 to 73, I could just to the rest of my life just keep talking about those years are just the greatest, the most exciting things. Don't forget these were years where movies. And some people only know this maybe through a retro theater or something. Movies came out, and whether they were single or double features or triple features, they played in one theater.
Yeah.
So when a new movie came out, they play in one theater, and you'd have to go to that theater to see that particular movie for however long they decided it was going to be there. So that was exciting. Was which theater it's going to be at. Are you going to go? I mean, like these are all things that definitely electrify the memory of and also like another thing I love is concession stands, like the soda machines. Like sometimes they had like soda machines with just like a wax cup, and the shaved ice would come down to a wax cup, and you drink it, and it's like you'd the syrup and everything. I mean, so that was kind of cool. They don't have that anymore. I mean, now it's like the stupid things with the
Dude McMahon in our chat wants to know how old were both of us in 1971. Are you okay sharing that?
I was like around between 5 and 6.
and I was negative 16.
You were just an idea, a worry in maybe both of your parents' minds at some point.
I
Or were
think
they not married in like
19
1980 or something?
my mom in 1971 was only like 3 or
There
4.
you go.
So
There you go.
yeah, I'm not
It
even
happens.
a thought.
It happens.
I'm curious because right before we went live, you and I were talking about how being a video essayist and editor and writer that you've been for a lot of this time, before our interview together, you had not gotten like major amounts of feedback on a lot of that from the public. I don't know if you saw this chat come through on your side, but Paul Berryman says, since watching your interview with Howard, it's changed how I approach watching films and have engaged with and enjoyed films so much more. Looking forward to this today.
That's awesome. Good. You're in my will, Paul. It's not worth anything, but you're in it. I appreciate that. That's really, that's how I make friends. It's like when people say that, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm there. That's really what it's. I'm glad. That's good. I mean, it's all about enjoying films more, not enjoying some films sometimes, or or under certain your specific conditions or criteria. I mean, it's like, and it's still weird. People don't get that when I try and discuss this with them, is that I don't care about what your tolerances are or what your vision for an expectation was. I don't care. I was always like that. I never cared. What I do care about, if someone says, oh, this director repeats these sort of ideas, or how they work, these guys always work together, and you could see like the set designer does this always and he always does that, and it's metaphoric and blah blah blah, like not academic, but I definitely like that. Just an idea gets me off. I don't want to know that I can only talk about some things with this one person, or if they say something like, fight me, I hated this film, fight me. No, but I'll just delete you off my thread. It's like, I don't want to, I'm not interested. You're a brick wall there. It's almost always an attention stealing device, at least from what I've encountered. I'm sure people just innocently just want to talk about opinion, but why would they assume that I care what they hate? Unless they're giving me warning signs that they're never going to change, or they're never going to open their mind, and I can't discuss. There's even some people who, or even they're supposedly open-minded and they discuss cinema, but they'll ridicule. It would, in my mind, I wouldn't say obvious, but readings like subtextual reading, like that's part of the great fun of it. I just did a thing for Film Masters. I just did a piece that they were wonderful letting me do on Roger Corman's The Terror, and me and my Destructible Man partner, we have a defunct blog for now. It's coming back, but we've been doing, sort of replacing the blog with like doing video essays, like we did the Dracula versus Frankenstein piece, which was the first one we did on the deconstruction of the movie Dracula versus Al Adamson's Dracula versus Frankenstein, when it was, people ridiculed it for decades, and we never did. I mean, obviously, there's some ulterior camp value. I mean, that's right, within the fabric of the movie, but it's also very appreciative. And there's dummy deaths in this thing, and for us, we notice dummy deaths. We see trickle effects, both thematic and also visual, and it was too consistent in this movie. I mean, it was like Al and Sam Sherman must have called us in 1970 or 69 and said, "Can we consult you on the?" It's like we really it totally fit in our paradigm of how we analyze movies using dummy deaths, and dummy deaths is in the fabric of cinema from the very first edit. So, it's very, to us, it's very important that people start to understand movies are beyond their taste or opinion, and there's other ways of looking at film or reading film, and it's so much more fun than just sitting there going that I will never like this movie because it wasn't what I wanted, or I don't like these kind of movies because they're stupid, or the people who like them are stupid and that's why they're made. This labyrinth of hostility, and then antagonism and condescension. I'm just not into it. I have a filter. I just will delete you off my wall if on Facebook or whatever. I have no compunctions. It's like I posted. I said, you're negative, you're gone, and I'll allow certain things. Like if I want to make a case out of somebody, I'll let them embarrass themselves.
Right.
But I just I'm so happy that people actually care about that, or and you're seeing, like, it's great. They're actually changing their minds about the way they think they've been looking at movies. That says a lot.
Yeah.
That puts you in high mensch territory as far as I'm concerned, because now you're caring about the movies. I used to have discussions when he was on Facebook, Roger Ebert. I said, how do you say you love movies when you have at least 2 books that are called "I hate this movie"? I mean, like, you ruin people's careers by going out and having a dog of the week. I mean, like, I just tune you guys out when I was like 11 years old. I was tuning them out. And if people ever look, I have them still. I used to buy, or my mom used to get them for me religiously, every new edition of the Leonard Maltin or the Stephen Schuer Movies on TV guide. Now, Stephen Schuer, his books were just like, boy, oh boy, the 1-star ratings went crazy. And I know there was a lot of moral issues when they were written. Sure. I mean, like, Dirty Harry got like 1-star, bullet. I mean, yeah, I understand, because it's a fascist. It's a scary, at the time, a scary fascist reaction to, law. So, I mean, it was, so I totally get that. But at the same time, there are, if you read some of those initial capsules, they're really kind of damning altogether. And I'm like, well, but what's the filmmaking about? What's the film about? What's the language they're using? How are they conveying this? I mean, it's still fascinating whether or not morally I can say it's not an alignment with my own soul, but as a director. And also, directors don't always have the power. And Don Siegel didn't quite have the power to own up that maybe that wasn't his total political bent, although he definitely showed signs of changing. Watch Coogan's Bluff again, but though you're dealing again with, Clint Eastwood, and the two of them would just sit on the floor like kids, putting the story together, putting the scripts together, the different versions. So, a director doesn't always cater to his own belief systems. He's a lot, sometimes, especially in that era, that's their job,
Right.
and they used their skill sets, but they also had to totally placate their star and things like that. So, to give it 1 star, I don't even, on Letterboxd, I don't even give star ratings. I only talk about films that I can understand or that I want to sort of spark discussion about. But I don't even put a star rating to things like that. So I just appreciate when people, come out and they say things like, oh my God, I look at it differently. So that's just, I feel great, because, after a while, you just feel like you're totally alone. And who can I discuss this stuff with? Which is why I love, being here with you, because you do. I mean, and you get it. I mean, like, you have good things to say about things. You don't want to rewrite the movie. I mean, and everybody has that in them. And of course, right, especially if you're creative, but to also judge the film and damn it, I wouldn't be here, that I would just rather not. And I do that with, commentaries too. If I'm working with someone on a commentary, I tell them straight out, if I don't want to hear criticism, I don't want to hear what ifs, I don't want to hear failed expectations, I'll walk in the middle of the session. I have no interest. I can't participate with that. I can't work off of that. So that's sort of a thing that, but luckily everyone that I work with either complies or agrees. So, it's not really in the forefront of our thinking. It makes it very easy.
Well, I agree. You and I are very much on the same page for a lot of that. It's not fun for me to sit here, especially for like an hour-long show, to talk about just terrible movies. I'm not the kind of person.
Have you had that? You don't have to give names, but I mean, have you had that happen? Or
I mean, there's been certain ones that people are, they're really not a fan of the movie, and they'll share that, and maybe a couple of reasons, but there's never any super long diatribes or anything, thankfully.
That's fair. I mean, yeah.
Normally in this part, we talk about a couple pickups or recent watches. Is there anything that you've picked up recently you want to share with everybody, or something that you've watched that's amazing that you're not working on?
Oh, I haven't. I don't think I've watched a film that I wasn't working on for months now.
Right.
But there must have been silly. Well, hold on. Let me think. Of course, there has to be some things.
Well, while you think on that, I will
Yeah.
share. I got a gift from one of the fans of the channel this week. One of our
Wow.
patrons sent in a book that he wrote. This is the Fright File, and
Oh,
this is
cool.
from Mr. Dustin Putman, who is in the chat right now.
Great
I
cover.
literally just opened this right before going live. Had no idea what it was going to be. Dustin, this is amazing. He signed this and everything. This is a 10-year anniversary edition. This is incredible. I'm absolutely going to love this. I flipped through it. It looks great. Really wonderful picture of Dustin on the back. This is a great gift,
Go
Dustin.
put
So
that
thank
out.
you very much.
Who's the
It
publisher?
is Haunted Sideshow Press.
Looks good.
Yeah, it
Textured
feels wonderful.
cover. I gotta say, yeah, that looks awesome. Great cover.
It's got one of those nice soft matte covers and everything.
And it's not cheeseball cover either. It doesn't sell
No.
it short. I think it looks classy. I like that.
Yeah, genuinely interesting, super
cool.
engaging. This is incredible. Yeah, can't
I'd
wait
love
to
get
dive
my
into.
copy of that, Dustin. No, I'm just kidding. Of course you can.
Dustin's now going to message
I'd
me to
read
ask for your address, probably.
No, I'll give it to you myself. No, it looks really good though.
It really does. So, did you think of anything that you've watched recently?
Oh, there has to be. Jog my memory. What would I have watched? Oh, yes. I started watching. I saw Zoo Warriors: The Magic Mountain. I have all
Oh,
these.
nice.
Yeah, it was.
I've still not seen that one.
I have like 10 different incarnations of that thing, from VHS straight through all different types of like VCD and DVDs. And I just never watched it. But I remember, when I'm trying to think when it was. Was it the 90s? I can't even remember anymore. It was maybe the early 90s or mid 90s when the Incredibly Strange Film Show from England started doing stuff, and I knew about these movies, but I just never, I was just watching so much stuff. Always, me and my Destructible Man partner Kevin Marr, he would just come out. We would just watch stuff. I mean, like 50 films in like a 4-day weekend. It's like just watch from morning to night with just maybe an occasional food break, or we would sleep through some of them. Whatever. We'd kick each other, wake up. Watch this stuff. And I had so many of these wonderful like Choi Hark films, and all that, that whole area, Jackie Chan. We would go into the city to see them in New York City at the Sun Sing or the Music Palace, I think it was. And so occasionally we would go in and meet friends and actually go see them, in the theater. But I don't know, it seems like the ones that I'd be most interested in, like all the Hopping Vampire films, Mr. Vampire series.
Yeah.
I just never, I had them all over and over and over again. I quadrupled, octuple dipped. I mean, a lot of people do. I never watched them. So I did. I sat down and I started watching them, when I could. So I watched Zoo, and I was, I mean, everything, and especially now it's like 30 years later or whatever. Yeah. Oh, and I had seen it before and loved it, but I did watch it back to back with that. I watched Ringo Lamb's Burning Paradise, which I actually think I saw projected. That is priority number one as far as I'm concerned.
Wild movie.
It's an insane film, and it's so beautifully done. I don't know. I just don't know how these guys, like, what kind of vitamin shots they were taking or how they were getting to sleep at night. I don't think that's beyond exhaustion. I don't know what they did, but boy, oh boy. And that's a class act. That's really a wild, wild film, so those were pretty intense. Zoo was great. And I watched, a Chinese Ghost Story.
I've been meaning to watch that. I think I have the Chinese release of all three of those, and I need to put them in.
Yeah, I've been getting the Eureka when Eureka would put them out in England, or 88 Films, company I have not done anything for yet, and I would love to. Guys, let's say hi. No, they're great. I mean, their extras are really pretty potent. They're very really well. But Eureka's does a great job. So I got those. Occasionally, I'll get whatever Hong Kong versions if they're not. I kind of try and do research where I found that. Let me see. Oh, hey, cool beans. You count Yorga Vampire? Yes, awesome. I'm glad people get time to watch stuff. I couldn't recommend those more. I mean, seriously, Chinese Ghost Story, they all exceeded my expectations, nice. Which is great because I try not to go in with any, but you feel like a fool because you've owned them for 35 years and you just never got around. It's almost embarrassing, Right. Those were really exceptional, and those got it's good because they did sort of, it's like getting a dose of oxygen. You sort of clear your brain, palate cleanser, right? That you clear your brain because doing commentary or video essay after commentary and video essay, your brain's going to explode because I don't even do these things with a lot of I try not to if I can't avoid like the Wikipedia syndrome. Everyone's going to have looked at that stuff. I try and figure out what the movie's about. Right. I try and figure out the trajectory of the director or the crew or the writers or whatever, and over their careers, and see how this fits in. So after a while, my brain just wants to blow apart, And so these were really perfect. Burning Paradise, still, if no one hasn't seen that one yet, seriously, just like whatever. I think. I don't want to get it wrong. I think Vinegar Syndrome did a great version of it, and I think it's Eureka did another version of it in England, and I would have to say both versions are great, are worth getting, because you'll want to watch it a second time anyway. But the extras are totally different, and the actual look of the film is kind of different on both of them too. So I had no complaints either one of them. So those are really just scrumptious,
Well, Howard, are we ready to take a time machine back to 1971, my friend?
I'm there already. I'm waiting for you.
Well, we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning. During this time, you saw a lot of things while you were young. Looking back on it now, why is 1971 so special to you? And what, if anything, do you feel is like an overall theme for that year when you look back on it for film?
Yeah. Well, it was definitely, we talked about this. I've been seeing movies since I was born because I was with my parents. We lived in suburbia in the 60s, and they took us. There was not much to do. My dad worked thousands of hours a week, and he came home and we went to see everything. And you could do that back then. It wasn't like, oh, I only see this guy's movie. We weren't educated. There was nothing, we didn't know. It was, you grew up with movies, so you remember the movies that you grew up with. But when you're older and when you're a kid, you get subjected to everything that you're dragged to. And, and then you can have bargaining power if you do hear of a movie that you wanted to see, which I was doing probably before I was even 4. So it was movie centric. We were lucky because there were movie theaters popping up all around us, but it was still semi-rural, where I was in Stony Brook, Long Island. And don't forget, this was like the Vietnam War was going. It was 2 years before it was over, and it was a long 2 years. Yeah. And that was just when, starting in like 69, 70, they were starting to come out with a lot of allegories about Vietnam, which means that the amount of violence on screen was up to a point of atrocity. Because that's what the directors were sort of. They were really, they were trying to make some points, political points, and they could only do that by showing them what your kids who are being sent off to war are experiencing. So, like 1969, you're going to start having films like The Wild Bunch, which it was fought against. I mean, that was chopped to pieces. I don't even know. It's embarrassing to look now and say this nothing is. Oh, hey, distorted vision. So we're neighbors, or sort of once we're neighbors. Yes, Sayville. I go there too. Hello. They, then there's. I mean, we're looking at movies now. The John Wick movie. I mean, can you imagine? There's no one's having any problems getting anything really, on camera. Right. Peckinpah, what they had to nail him to the cross, for decades. Yeah, all right, great, But I guess that's part of the allure, the history of it is that corporations were still shying away from the truth about what was happening, and to their kids in Vietnam. So. It was really up by the time 1971 came around. Not only were they were doing allegories, but they were just amplifying the violence to just as an extension of that. So even if the storylines were no longer political or metaphorical, you were now being introduced to experiences that were really traumatic and really violent. So, I mean, this is the year that Straw Dogs came out. This is the year Clockwork Orange came out. These were, major studios. These weren't, independent films. But you also had little entertainments like Willard. If anyone hasn't seen Willard, and I understand it has been extremely difficult. I think there was a VHS release before. I think it was Kino Lorber that put both of them out, with Nathaniel Thompson doing fantastic commentary work through both of the films.
I think it was Scream Factory, by the way.
Was it Scream Factory? Okay,
yeah.
Right. I see these films sometimes without the covers. I'm consuming them. So forgive me, Scream Factory. Great job on those discs. And I know the elements were really tough to find suitable elements. And I don't remember any real problems with those. Yes, there you go. Last Picture Show is going to get to all these. French Connection for sure.
Yeah.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's good point. Play Misty for me, absolutely. And I did a feature on the Kino disc, and I think they're putting that out with a 4K on that disc. I do a feature. Me and Kevin Marr, my Destructible Man partner, we did a feature length. And it was longer. We actually had to cut it.
So good.
We cut it. Thank you. We had to do we did a dissection. There's dummy deaths in that sucker. In fact, the dummy deaths were so shocking to people, dummy death, that there was an extra on the DVD that went into it. Like, they actually talked to Jessica Walters about her being a dummy. That's wonderful. I was like, pantless watching that. What can I say? And but we really that one we tried. In fact, I won't go into it. I was editing part of that in the hospital, but whatever. Great. That's like a perfect film. But 1971, shocking stuff. But Willard, and in 72 came Ben. Those are pretty perverse movies, and they were very heartbreaking, sad little stories. So you could get into it. It's directed by a guy who specialized in drama, old, 50s, 60s dramas. Wow. The lines for Willard with the rat attacks around the block. That's one of the ones I was telling you about. Like, I kind of remember seeing that in the summertime and waiting on a line for hours. That was baking. We were baking in the sun, waiting. Right. But we're talking about, like, the people on that line were sold out for that next show after waiting online for 2 hours. And then no one, we hadn't had something like that in my childhood experience until, like, The Love Bug, maybe a couple of years before, had that. Those are Disney movies. So of course, you're going to have that pump. But Willard was a real breakout sleeper. And it was traumatic. A really, really great. And you cared about him. Bruce Davison, just an amazing performance. So that is what, suddenly I started to, but I don't forget, I'm going to movies now. The difference was I was seeing even more. I mean, you don't realize how many films I saw a week in the theater when I was, preschool, in the theater. And then TV, of course, filled in the blanks. That's right. How obsessed I was as a little kid. But then in 71, now I'm getting plopped off at our local theaters with a friend, and we, it's PG. We can convert, or GP. I don't think they had PG then. Maybe they did, but the thing was GP. And they were dropping us off, thinking it was like safe for us to go. And it was just, some of these movies were just beautiful. But yes, all the ones that were listed here, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, that's what the children were like back then. Really perverse little freaks. Like, we were sick little shits. I mean, it was really sick. That's a sick movie. The book doesn't come across as ghoulish, because I think in the book, there's resolution. It's like, here they are, the girl who had to be, turned into the blueberry, had to get squeezed. But in the book, it's like, she's squeezed. Now she's 42 feet tall and thin. No. We didn't know if she died in the first movie. Augustus Gloop, astronomer. Did he die? The girl who drops into the furnace with the egg, did she die? I mean, no, you don't know. You don't know. It is, and it's scary. I mean, there's some scary. Doesn't a chicken's head get cut off in the boat ride?
The boat scene, yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, this is childhood. This was great. This was 1971, and that, to me, it's like but I do. It's the staple in the centerfold of those years, because again, I love the 70s in total. Just because that was formative for me, and there was so much stuff. But there's stuff like Peter Collinson, who did the original Italian Job, and Up the Junction, who I've always loved, and I always get shit for it. It's one of those litmus tests again for me. It's like the minute someone just like dismisses any Peter Collinson movie for any reason, I'm like, I have nothing to listen to when you start dissing that guy. I love him. I think he's just amazing. In fact, Nathaniel and I, we did commentary. We were lucky enough to do commentary on the 10 Little Indians that he did with a bizarre performance by Oliver Reed. But that's a great cast, a lot of fun. And there's like tons of different versions of that. It's like 3 different versions, which are very worth watching. But he did a film called Fright. And Fright with Susan George, amazing, terrifying film in it. I'm not sure if it was the very first babysitter in peril, film, but it really laid on the British Gothic. I mean, she's a babysitter, and the father of the kid that she's babysitting has been institutionalized. He's a psychopath, and he escapes with absolute murder on his mind. And he is played by Ian Bannon, who's just brilliant, and he is really terrifying. And that movie milks perfectly every inch of why you would never want to be a babysitter, especially out in the boondocks somewhere. Great movie. So that was another one that's like Fright to me, pure 71, beautiful. Then you have some other fantastic things. Have you ever seen The Hospital, the Paddy Chayefsky film?
I have not, no.
By Arthur Hiller, who was, around that time was cranking out some brilliant stuff like The Out-of-Towners in the previous year, and Plaza Suite, which everyone likes to say, it's a Neil Simon comedy. No, it's one of his, when Neil Simon writes them, it's a horror film. I mean, the Plaza Suite is hilarious, but it's so horrific, and that's another traumatic comedy, multiple story, but this one is just a gem. The Hospital is Paddy Chayefsky, so he wrote Network and Altered States, and he's a master satirist. But kind of all his characters talking like a univoice, which is sort of like what Tarantino sort of kind of naturally sort of does as well.
Right.
There's a pentameter. There's like a certain beat to the dialogue, but it's really one of the funniest films I'd ever seen. Even as a kid, I knew it was funny without even understanding what really was going on or what but as you get older, you grow into that movie, and it is an extremely dark, depressing film because it deals with reality. And for a GP rated film, it really went, again, much farther. That whole era, everything went much farther. Another movie that I remember going to a couple of times was The Hunting Party, which again, me and Nathaniel, one of the early films that we did commentary for. my God, just unprepared. I mean, I won't even go. I want to give it away too much, but there's some really shocking bits of violence that are just so perverse. The conclusion of that movie is just bizarre. But you could say it's a Wild Bunch sort of, but no, it has its own agenda, and it's definitely TV director Don Medford, who was one of the guys that just didn't. His films tried very hard not to look like TV movies. Didn't use that normal lens, which everyone criticizes, and whatever. So that's another one. And another big one that I just went, I made every member of my family take me to see it because I was too young. It was rated R. And I went I remember like 5 times during its initial release. Of Robert Aldrich's The Grissom Gang, who again, we got Nathaniel and I and Steve Mitchell got to do the commentary track for that for Kino, and that's like, thank God, it's like closure. That's an amazing film. All Aldrich's work. That's another guy that if you hear that something is lesser or greater, you're just gonna miss out for yourself because each film's very distinct and individual.
Right.
But again, it dealt with violence as part. Again, don't forget Vietnam War. It's violence as part of now your family system, your family. You are now dealing with attitudes about violence, desperation, social desperation, and also your class, your your stature, how much money you have, and who you are because of that money or because of the lack of the money. It's a Depression era film, obviously triggered because of Bonnie and Clyde's success. But then you have someone like Robert Aldrich, who doesn't think at all like Warren Beatty or Arthur Penn, and he's going to come up with something totally. So he used a story called No Orchids for Miss Blandish, which was a sick little book from the 40s, but the movie version, which I think Indicator, and Kino both put out. I think it was Kino.
That sounds right. Yeah.
They again, it's a movie that I keep hearing. It's not that good. I don't know what you just don't know what movie. It's the most savage, psychopathic, perverse thing, and to see it made in an era where you don't expect them to do this,
right?
Really fantastic. So. But the Grissom Gang was an interesting adaptation of that, using all that. It was when Aldrich had his own studio after the success of The Dirty Dozen. He really wanted to be independent, and he was a real union guy. He really his whole family was Republican. He was as Dem as you could get back in that era, and he fought for the unions, and he cared about all his employees. But the experiment didn't last very well. It lasted a few films, but. They're all worth watching, but Grissom Gang was a perfect 1971 movie for me. Don't forget Dirty Harry. That was another one where Don Siegel came out, and it was, everybody hated that film. That if you ever see one of those things, like they didn't have Rotten Tomatoes back then, they had a publication called Film Facts for decades, and which I'm sure is where Rotten Tomatoes got their whole format for. But I remember seeing have like the consensus, 15 reviews of like the major papers, 100% negative. It's like, wow, nobody liked The Dirty Harry. They were all thinking, this is an insane fascist movie. And it was. I mean, you can't, there's no way of just, but you have a borrowed Don Siegel, who used to mainly work with Universal at that point, but Warner Brothers stole him away for Eastwood, and it's just a brilliantly directed, really brilliantly written movie. It's just morally you have to just either go with it or just that's part of the experience. You walk away and you have to discuss that film because it is it's a scary film, and he's a scary character. No matter how sympathetic they make him, it's pretty interesting. Everyone's scary in that thing, but it was very one-sided and it was very stacked. So you really have to know what you're going in for, because there's a lot of triggers in that film for some people. But it's a brilliant movie. But boy, oh boy. That was, again, this is all I think back is like, this is the same year as all these other,
right.
It was a hostile year, it was an ugly year, and a very ugly even, I mean, I'm not saying that you know what I mean? Like the overall thing, you don't go to Straw Dogs and come out going like, "Oh, what a beautiful film! I love the way it's shot in England." I mean, there's some, it's evocative, but that's not what you're thinking. You're really emotionally involved in the degree of violence and the philosophy behind it, and that was the difference. Again, back then, even guys making like the USC students who got jobs making like smoker porn reels, even they were trying to put something, high. They usually see movies, they make jokes about, we're making a porn film, but you have all these intellectual, college students making them, directing them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why. It's just like, people were taught at a level, and they worked it in. They couldn't help it. They were just really smart, motivated, sort of, metaphoric minded individuals. And it's really cool. So a lot of the stuff from that year, no matter how morally offensive, or not even morally offensive, but just sort of just like trigger, to your sensibilities. It was a harsh year, and just so surprising. Now, of course, I do love, like I said, I love the whole 70s, but if you had to isolate it, I think things started to really change by 71, and 72, 73, it started to mutate again. But it was like, what do you call, like an apex of, this sort of sensibility, mixing like intelligence and activism, and ultimately, exploring attitudes and levels of violence that just, even for kids, just never, really was a focus before. And I think it was something special. I mean, what have you seen that you, how did it affect you? So, again, you didn't see it at the time. So how does that, or even how does what I'm saying even make, does that form a shape in your head that, you can identify with?
There's a lot, and obviously we're going to get into our list a little bit, and then we'll share. I'm sure you have a ton of honorable mentions after our list, like I do. But the years, you have to look at what in the 50s, what was that, and then the 71 started to change everything. It 70 to 71, 72 started to feel like this upward swing, because the 50s were so like wholesome, I guess, to a point, looking back from now. And then by the time we get to the middle of the 70s, everything felt sleazy. Like when I look back at the 70s, I love them because they feel gritty. They feel dirty to a point where it's just more authentic. And man, looking at my list, first off, way more European than I expected.
I didn't even go into the European films that,
both set there and filmed there, and a few, American films that were filmed in Europe. But there are so many that I just did not realize all came from this year. So, gosh, trying to get to a 5 for 1971 was like pulling teeth for me already.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I basically, I mean, that, what I just, to me, it's all equal. So, I'll just start remembering things as like A New Leaf, which was a Elaine May movie. I remember going to see that. That was a big 1971 for me. It was, and it was in keeping, even though it was rated G, it was in keeping still with what I was discussing about the sort of this philosophy of violence. It takes a classic screwball comedy, dark situation of a guy who's raised rich, and he doesn't know he has no skills, nothing, and he is told that he has put himself in penury, he has no money whatsoever. So he borrows money from his uncle, and then he has to figure out a way to pay it back.
Yeah.
And his big idea is to marry someone who is rich, but easy to kill. Like rated G. Easy to kill, so that he could pay his uncle back and have some money. Wow. Now, I remember going to see that movie and falling in love with Elaine May. I mean, I was hard crushing on her in that movie. She was like everything I ever wanted in a companion. I thought she was adorable and so smart, and everything she wanted to give it, and hilarious. There's like some brilliant set pieces in that are just classic. But I remember going home. My mom didn't go with us. It was my dad and my sisters. And she goes, how'd you like it? And I go, it was great. It was 3 hours long. I was in my head, you know, if it was long, it was great. I got to get it. It wasn't. It was an hour and 40 minutes. But I was like, I remember my dad laughing, you know. And it turned out it was actually longer than 3 hours when she made it. It was 3 hours and like 15 minutes. And Paramount took it away from her, cut it in half, and tried to make it, according to them, a little bit more, you know, commercial,
accessible or something. Yeah,
right. Even though I can't imagine that it wasn't accessible, but it was fucking funny and brilliant. And again, you're dealing with a lot of emotions, even as a little kid, about violence, about the morality that this character has, and the growth. Like, it's a love story, so you get to see him bypass this whole thing. But I don't remember. I mean, of course, they dealt with things like this, but like that's the way, you know, the trajectory of what I was seeing back then. It just made sense at that particular point. It was like, yeah, look at that. They're even discussing it in these screwball comedies that are romantic comedies. You know, wow. Pretty diverse types of movie that were, like you say, still gritty and grim.
Yeah.
You know, the TV shows also, I went through so many of them, so they were just there. But movies at that time had a real different sting to it. You know?
Yeah. Well, and again, especially that whiplash of going from the 50s to 60s, they're going to feel much different compared to what you had been seeing. So I get that.
Yeah, I mean, the eras don't. It was weird. Like every 10 years, everything looked different. Movies look different. You know, styles look different. Maybe after the 80s, when people were wearing headbands and leg warmers, and you know, after that, like from the 90s on, it's kind of hard unless you see like a cell phone or an old phone, you know, plugged into the wall. There's not much to really signify change in cultural, you know, in the way your life looks. So people are able to watch movies, I think, from like the 90s on and still think that maybe they can be, you know, current.
Right.
When I'm growing up in the 70s, 10 years prior, you're looking at stuff from the 60s that just don't look anything like, you know, what's happening now. And then you go back and there's the 40s, and the 40s had a certain look, a certain style and look to it. The 30s definitely had a different look. And then before that, you had silent movies. And I hate saying it, a silent movie was as old as what Star Wars, the first Star Wars, is now to people. I'm from an era where they would have silent movies on like public television, and I'd watch them. And I didn't know, you know, I didn't know there's silent. You had a little explanation about my grandmother's like, oh, he didn't have sound. You know, okay, but it wasn't that old. It was, you know, 50 years, 40 years.
Right.
You got to put things in perspective. So it was a fun time, and there were hundreds. I mean, you think this is people are going bankrupt buying all these discs. That's what it was like in a theater. Like there were hundreds and hundreds of movies in release at the same time, stacked with double features, triple features, sometimes all day stuff. The big one also, I remember. Have you ever seen the actual, not Born Losers, but the Billy Jack?
Oh, yeah, I think Shout Factory put that out. I think.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know, but that was that set was a bungle for various reasons. That was chopped. Some of the prints were chopped to pieces and stuff like that. Oh, whatever.
That checks out. They're Shout Factory.
They're cool. They're cool movies though, and and again, kind of left-wing, hyper-fascist left-wing. It was really weird, really cool. But that's another one. I went a day after day after day to see this one. And eventually, like Planet of the Apes, because that was another one, was Escape from the Planet of the Apes. That's a purely traumatic film. It's a horrifying climax of that. I think it was rated G, like the second one was too. Another from '70. That was another horrific G-rated film. It was really brutal. It'd probably get like an R now, or you know, PG-13. But you know, it was really sick violence towards the end of that film. especially for the target audience, which were just kids. Not mainly kids, but that's who was hooking on it back then. Right. And so they would have all day thing, like they had the Go Ape thing eventually in like 1974, I think, because the TV show was going to come out, the Planet Apes TV show. So they had Go Ape, and they had all 5 films in one day. Of course, we went. You drop your kids off there, you know where they are, and it's we get fat on diabetic at the concession stand. And it was wonderful. And Billy Jack, towards, I think it was the last one, which was 77, I think it was. And I'm another guy. I didn't know. I kind of just enjoyed all of them. They all had different feel to it, and they all had different styles and influences. And I still think they're fascinating. Some people just can't deal with any of them. I'm just glad I didn't miss out. I've seen them all dozens of times, but they had the Billy Jack day. But you have to understand, one of these Billy Jack movies is 3 hours long. So and you're watching, the first one is like an American International biker flick, which is really brutal. And then the second one is an independent production. And that was savage in its own way and memorable. And then the later sequels are just sort of like, whoa, he's not sticking to any formula. So really you had some special stuff to get used to. But that was another one. That was a big, it was like it was taken like the anti-Dirty Harry. And they both made like buckets of cash. Really popular.
Yeah, there's, again, trying to make this list was crazy just because of the weird genres and so many titles that I've seen so many times. So before we name everything, let's go through these. I think at the moment 4 of on my top 5 still have not been said yet between either of us. So I'm excited to talk about them. Would you like to go first, or would you like to have me go first?
I'm glad that I've given my big list, but of course there's I just keep thinking of what's there, but no, I'm just ready to hear yours. I've basically blathered my main list of influences. I can't include Bed Knobs and Broomsticks because I just didn't see it in 1971. But again, that might be, I remember I watched that recently. A different version, actually. I saw a much longer version, I think, on DVD, or was it VHS even? I'm not sure. And then I went to go see it again recently, and there's like about 20, 25 minutes that are gone from the version that I saw.
Oh, geez.
So, they put it out, or at least most of it. Maybe some parts just couldn't be found or whatever, but that was 71, but that didn't have the same impact. Walkabout, that's another one. Nicholas Rome's Walkabout, big, but was that 70 or 71? I'm not sure.
That was 71.
It was 71. That's another one.
Yeah.
But
well, I will remind everybody, when we do this, it's never like what we think are the best films. It's 5 of our favorite films. And again, with this year, you and I could have probably done 5 of these shows and had different lists every single time.
Oh yeah, well,
with all 5 of the films being,
because I don't rate movies, so it's all
right.
Or all, if I saw it and I remember it, then my God,
Well, my number 5, I'm going to go with a British film. Like I said, lots of European on my list for some reason. And I'm going to go with Michael Caine's Get Carter.
Oh, my God, yes. I'm so ashamed. Yes.
I love this movie. Incredible release on 4K fairly recently over in the UK. This is one that is just a wonderful crime film that is... It's shot so just intelligently. It is put together in a way that is captivating, and which is kind of funny because this is one of those films that I imagine quite a few people probably don't love because it's different than what they're used to in crime films. And it's Michael Caine's pure perfection, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably is his best film.
Yeah. And Mike Hodges, who directed it, has had a great, really interesting career. Someone mentioned earlier, Flash Gordon. He had a lot of elasticity in his imagination. He was a really, really great director. Did a great 4-hour mystery for HBO called Dandelion Dead that I highly recommend people seeking out. I think HBO put it out on DVD themselves. Black Rainbow for Showtime was another great thriller, but he did some funny crap. He made after Get Carter, he did the other Michael Caine thing. Oh, what is it? Damn, not Peeper. Oh my goodness. Oh, I can't remember the name of the movie. People out there, the follow up with Michael Caine. What was it called? My God.
Let me see if I can figure it out.
Hilarious. It's going to come to me eventually. But it could take a whole nother show to get it back to me. Anyway, Hodges was pretty elastic, so you never knew what to expect from him, but he was really, really good. And I got to talk to him once because he had done some really great stuff for, I think it was the BBC, some short crime film. Pulp. Thank you, Marco, my man. Yeah, Pulp, hilarious. But yeah. Thank you, Marco. He's watching my back. He was the sweetest guy I've ever talked to. Just didn't expect after Get Carter.
Right.
Oh God, what a just a cool guy, a really great guy. And I didn't know how old he was, but I wish he had another 10, 20 years of films behind him, because my God. But there is a moment in Get Carter, I won't say it, but you just do not expect that you're going to care for this guy. And there's a moment where I still just can't believe it is pure cinema, and it really just maneuvered you into another emotional realm you never expected. That's why it's just brilliant. Yes, Deaf Crocodile. Yes, I agree. BFI UHD is gorgeous. Great disc. All right, now shame me again. Keep going.
The next one is one that has, just like you listed, it influenced a lot of the films that I ended up loving. Bava's A Bay of Blood.
Absolutely, and that actually is on my list.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, I think I didn't mention it mainly because I think I saw it towards the end of '72, because it didn't play by me. I didn't know it, because it was called Twitch of the Death Nerve.
Twitch of the Death Nerve.
I do think, from what I had been reading, that it may hold the world record of the film with most release titles internationally.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that still holds, but that I've seen that mentioned a couple of times just recently, and I agree. It's an amazing film. I know Bava really thought it was almost like a masterpiece. It was very witty, and I remember the first time. The reason why I knew to go was a great magazine, which was it was for slightly older, for college students, the Castle of Frankenstein. And they were reviewing R-rated movies, or famous monsters of Filmland. They might mention some stuff, but they wouldn't emphasize it. But of course, they had review sections. And I'm not sure if it was Joe Dante doing these capsules or they were already starting to get a lot of other writers to contribute. But I remember their recommendation of Twitch of the Death Nerve. And of course, you read a review in one of those magazines, and bam, you're looking every day. Right. You're hoping it's going to pop up in front of your face.
Especially with that title.
And it did, and it played with The Creeping Flesh, which was a great, I think, Amicus title with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. That was an elegant film. Very elegant, ghoulish, but elegant little armor. And how, but that's how they would do it. They would sometimes put a cool PG horror film with this really hard R, and I had never seen anything like that. A cool movie. Yeah, and Bava's just great.
Well, and for people that have never seen it, which supposedly it's pretty underseen. It's an interesting story too, because it's a bunch of people trying to take out individuals that are in line to get an inheritance, and there's a lot of deaths in this. And you'll notice you've seen some of the deaths prior, probably because they are lifted scene for scene in Friday the 13th 1 and 2, and it's so well made. It's shot really interestingly, and it's basically the birth of the slasher in a way, because it's the first one that really had that full on, the entire thing has this now what we know as all of the tropes, and it's just so well made and
funny as shit. It's really witty. Bob is a witty guy. He's really, really smart, funny guy. So that was another joy. It's another one where, again, you see it when you're a kid and you're watching it like this. You're scared, but 30, 40 years later, you're watching it, you're laughing your head off, and you think, wow, this is a smart movie. But there's some great stuff in that. The first like 10 minutes of that film, I think there's like 2 or 3 deaths within the first 5 or 10 minutes that are hilarious. They're ghoulish as hell. I mean, you're sitting there going, but what a beautiful, it's such a classy, beautiful film that you're shocked, constantly. It was just a smart film. Good. You embarrassed me second or third time already. Good. Keep going.
I can't remember if this one was said or not. This one may have been, but number 3 for me is one that I saw for the first time probably about 2.5 years ago and fell in love with it. Now I've watched it 3 or 4 times. Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
My man, beautiful John Hancock. I'm happy to say I'm friends with John. He is one of my favorite filmmakers. One of my very favorite American filmmakers, and I was lucky enough to feel like I grew up with his movies because he did. They right from the outset, and there's a cool backstory to that. I mean, a friend of mine, David Cano, wrote a really good thing for Fangoria about the making of that, and it was really eye opening. And then after that, there's so many little augmentations to the stories, but I love every minute of that movie. That was actually my 7th birthday party. And that night, there was a lot of calls from the kids' parents to my mom. Like I said, crying. That's another one I was going to, that's primed for Cinetrauma. But spooky movie and be just beautiful. And I think it was supposed to have been, originally, somewhat satirical or humorous, or that the script was just very different. But John's movies are, it doesn't matter what genre they are. He did Bang the Drum Slowly after that. He did Baby Blue Marine with Jan Michael Vincent, and one that I think everybody should see from 1979, I think, was California Dreaming, a real heartbreaker with great Seymour Cassell, who's in this Cassavetes films. He's brilliant in that too. But yeah, I love John Hancock. I really do, and he can do no wrong. And lately, I mean, he's done stuff very independently, and it's with his late wife, also Dorothy Tristan, who was actually in the movie that was it's one we hadn't discussed yet from 1971, but she was really brilliant. She's always brilliant in Clute. She plays another hooker in Clute from 1971, and that is I think that was sort of like, I'm not sure if it shared influence from Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which I think was 1970. I'm not sure if that was that might have been 1971. I'm not sure, but that definitely, to me, has very strong Giallo references. And I know nobody wants to hear that word anymore. Like, oh, is it American Giallo? But these movies have influence. It's not, may not be conscious. It may not be, the same intent, but most definitely. And if you listen to Michael Small, I think it's Michael Small's score, it definitely has, some Morricone text, and of course the use of the tape to tape, reels being shown. That's something which just goes into, I think, even Deep Red a few years later. So there's some very scary things in Clue too. But Dorothy Tristan, who was John Hancock's eventual wife, she had been married to a mentor of mine, Aram Avakian, but she married John. She didn't do too bad. She's a great writer. She wrote the last couple of movies that they did together, and purely independently financed. It's just a wonderful story. But yeah, good pick. Great movie, scary as shit, and also really human, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really, again, really human. And this is a movie, people take it for granted. This is like, they're shooting, 15 to 18 hour days to get this stuff done, and they're making it seem real, and people take it for granted. I mean, wow, I never take it for granted. I'm always like, after I experience it, I was like, wow, how the hell did you do that for Let's Scare Jessica to Death? Yeah. But yeah, great. Batting 1,000 now.
It's a bit of a slow movie, but it is so haunting, and the ending is great. Super underrated acting in that one too.
Yeah, it's deliberately paced. It's paced well. It's scary.
I wanted to throw out there, we were just talking about some Argento stuff. I don't have them on my list, but two Argento films from 71. We got Four Flies on Grey Velvet and Cat o' Nine Tails. Both came out in the same year.
I thought Four Flies was 72.
Here it was 72. The original release was 71.
Okay. So I never know.
Yeah.
Great movies. Really, both of them are great.
In the same year. It's wild.
I love Cat o' Nine Tails too. No one ever wants to talk about that one. I'm like, that's for a long time. That was like my favorite Argento. Technically, I think it's one of his most beautifully shot films. And then after, in 73, he did. Thank God, Severin finally released this. But what an amazing film! The 5 days, and that probably is my personal favorite Argento of all time, and I think it has a lot of similarities with, and I think Argento may have had something to do with 1900, Bertolucci's 1900. It's sort of like an oddball companion piece to it, a little more comic, but that's one I do not ignore that movie, especially if you like Argento and you're like, I don't want to see a comedy by him. This was no misfire. It's just an incredibly regional film. It's an underspoken piece piece of Italian history. Yeah, good. 5 Days is excellent spaghetti. Yes, it is. I'm glad to hear that. It's great. Yeah, I love that. I love it. I love that movie. Luigi Cavallo, who shot Deep Red and who's was camera on La Ventura. Oh my God, you just really can't. You can't get better than that. Really brilliant stuff.
Number 2 on my list is one that we've talked about up and down quite a few times already, but I got to go with the almost perfection of Straw Dogs. This movie, the first time I saw it, blew me away. I went into it going, "Oh, it's from the 70s. Not going to be that violent." Well,
and it was probably cut still when you saw it.
Yeah.
They've been dropping a little bit extra in over the years. Finally, I think it's all out there. But yeah, no, great. Really great movie.
Great movie, incredible central performance, beautiful cinematography. Just
John Coquillon, right? John Coquillon. Yeah. Was his guy for a long time. Yeah, amazing guy. Cool thing about Straw Dogs, and I've never had any answers about it. One, I really love. I am huge fan of David Zelig Goodman, the screenwriter of that. Huge fan of him. Again, I don't know. In the 70s, it was like a target. In reviews, and I don't understand why. He's been connected. I tried to be connected with as many of these releases with his scripts as possible, like March or Die. I did stuff for the imprint disc, but David Zelig Goodman, the work he did on Straw Dogs. Because I read the original book. I have the original book. Boy, did he and Peckinpah really. No stone unturned with the psychological, metaphorical. It's definitely not a movie. It's definitely not a movie that's exploitative. It's not designed to entertain in that type of prurient manner. It's an intellectual discussion about violence and when you employ it. I mean, it's political. It's one of those great moments in 1971. I'm glad that's the cherry on your cake, because I think you're right. I mean, I totally agree. And it means something different to everybody who goes through it. It's depending on when you saw it. You saw it. No, how old were you when you first saw it? Did you just say?
Probably late teens, maybe.
Wow. Oh my. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You got kids. How old are they? Take them now. Show them now. They got to be like
8-year-old and a 7-year-old. Yeah.
Well, they're a little too old, so you missed out. You really. Yeah, my parents. No. 7 years old, perfect. My mom fight. She had to explain. I told you, explain to these guys. If he's old enough to ask to see the movie, he's old enough to see it. I mean, oh God, my mama, love you. Like, God, everything. Brutal. Oh, okay. This might really be my number one for 1971.
Interesting. I wonder if it's the one that I was about to say. Let's see.
Go ahead. No, I defer.
No, now I wanted to see if it was the same. We were talking about violence and what brings it on. My number one had to be the super subversive Ken Russell's The Devils. I mean, this is
I
the
was
one
gonna-
for me.
Mine was going to be Ken Russell's The Devils and The Boyfriend. They're the two-headed dragon. That is absolutely good man. Yeah. And I did see it first run.
Wow.
And I remember reviews being hostile. And I'm really hostile. And of course, my family, it was my mom, and my grandmother, we went to see that. Not my dad, and he was working, and my sisters, no. But it was Aldous Huxley. So it was like, look, he didn't even get, that movie didn't even uncut, it didn't even dare. Paul Berryman, good man, loves both The Devils and The Boyfriend. It's that film, not great. Oh, good Ken Russell fans here. God bless you. A genius as far as I'm concerned. He is the genius's genius because he's funny and he's three-dimensional and he haunts me still. I will go into
innovative.
That he haunts me. He visits periodically, and I'll say my dreams, but they don't feel like dreams. But that's for our Ken Russell episode. Yeah, it's an amazing film and brilliantly satiric, but great cast. I mean, of other great artists like Christopher Loge and Dudley Sutton. I mean, the cast is incredible. The Boyfriend was made to, I don't know if it was intentional, but it came off this way as almost an apology to superficial, sensitive, hypersensitive critics who, I don't know, didn't know any better. And it was rated G, and it was a musical, and I remember seeing that. And they were, I think, and what's ironic and sad is both of them were hideously butchered for their releases internationally. Terribly, Stan Giza. Devil's good. The Boyfriend is a perfect complement to The Devils in every way possible. And I remember that the very, very end of it was just hilarious. I mean, and I saw that, it was just, we were so little and it worked fine. I mean, there was The Devils, in fact, I remember distinctly not being terribly traumatized by. I think the climax is where, again, I was very upset at that point.
Right.
I didn't get all the, the metaphors and wit and satire all the way through. I was starting to be aware of it. I was starting to feel like more of an adult, perception. But yeah, I agree. What a great choice. Good for you. Yeah, it's amazing.
How about the set pieces in that movie? It's not something that ever gets a lot of attention, but man, some of the visuals in that are so stark. And when when somebody tries to explain the storyline, it's almost exactly what you would picture in your head of what would be happening in the background, and it's so perfect.
Yeah, and very studied. Like, I mean, Russell. I mean, with his ideas of music and art, and how he, incorporating his knowledge of art and the composition of medieval art. And the subjects of medieval art and music, they all work their way behind the scenes in that film. It's so much more. His films are so complex that, of course, he was going to be damned. From the very beginning, he'll have his little handful of activists, the pro-Russellians, and then you'll have people who just don't find the value in him. And maybe that's not so much the case anymore, because his stuff looks so different. Like you said, right. But I thought the one he did in '72, of course, I think is often, because of The Devils, I'm so tempted to say that that Savage Messiah is his masterpiece, but again, that's for another day. Savage Messiah breaks my heart in all sorts of ways, and that's the one that got his best reviews at the time, because it was they felt it was restrained. It's not restrained; it's pure Ken Russell, but it is, I think, more of sort of the underside of the abrased side of his soul at that time. And if you haven't seen it yet, I can't recommend it enough. I was so little, as my dad used to take me to this great bookstore, which downstairs was an old bookstore, but downstairs they had the film books, and one of them was the book, which I think it was letters maybe between the two people, two main characters in the film, and it was a movie tie-in to Savage Messiah, and that's how I found out about Savage Messiah, was the book. And it was playing, and my mom went, and we were both like crying. I remember we were really wrapped up in that. So it's another one, sort of like, what a perfect panorama he gave you with The Devil's Boyfriend and then Savage Messiah.
Yeah.
Wow, it was pure gifts. We were gifted those movies, because there's no reason why they should have gotten made. You really have to thank some people for being persistent, and hopefully one day, I don't know how it's going to happen, but hopefully we will get an uncut Devils, because even the bootleg that bravely attempts to restore as much as possible that was available in some kind of usable media. That's the best one you can probably get right now, but it's still longer. It's not long. It's still 113 minutes, but there's still stuff that's maybe a little slightly out of order and needs to still be put back in. But wow. And if you see the theatrical release, and then you see this, what's the closest to the actual vision, they cut his heart out. They cut his soul out. It's not the same movie. If anything, there's a lot of visual foreshadowing to what you see in Tommy, and that's not in the American theatrical. Right. And it's barely in the British, which was slightly longer, but also cut. So if there are any hardcore Tommy fans, which again, you start going, well, maybe that's his masterpiece. It's just they're so complex. How can how do you
He's
make
done
these
so many
things?
great things, though.
How the hell do you do that? He is like a brain that just happened to have a body casing. I think that the body held him back. The brain was up.
And for somebody that was born in 27, we are like very lucky to get everything we got out of that dude.
Yeah, I just wish there was more. He was a one of a kind, But I thoroughly endorse the number one on that one. That's great. Yes, for sure.
Well, did you have an actual top five? Because I know you spoke on yours. Did you want to run through what they were?
I don't. It's hard. I really, it's like I don't think like that at all. I mean, whatever I said was like these are the ones that like were important. I'm sure you'll start listing. It's like you could list anything from that era. I mean, from that era. I mean, I'm one of these guys that infuriates people because it's like I'm not being blanketly gushing. It's just. I don't know how these things get made, and we're so lucky they stay in my head and they've just been part of me. And so keep naming movies, and I'll just keep
Let's see the rest of my. I have 10 honorable mentions, I guess. Right. Next up was Clute. This was the number 6 on my list. This almost took over Get Carter a couple times.
Wow, I can understand that. I could dig that. Nothing really looks like Clute either. Gordon Willis is on fire. It's like. He's so young.
And that Criterion Blue is incredible. They did really well by that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Next, we talked about this one slightly, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, this is just
great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
We didn't say much about it, but A Clockwork Orange. Nowhere near my favorite Kubrick, but it's a great movie.
What can I say? To me, again, it's like, where did that come from? Pretty amazing. And this, you're talking Anthony Burgess, you're talking Kubrick's adaptation of Anthony Burgess, you're talking about, I believe, John Alcott, who was, I think, Jeffrey Unsworth's cameraman and graduated from 2001 to now direct. And that's what happens with Kubrick's assistant cameras or DPs. They always end up being Douglas Milsom, the same thing. I mean, I don't know. When that came out, we were just stunned, really stunned. There was nothing like it, and the fact that it was, and they even had it in the trailer. they use the trailer's great. The original trailer where they're flashing words, like subliminal flashes of words, violent, and then they show an image, have a semi-clip. Amusing was one of the words they used in the trailer, and that stays with you because the movie is a satire. It's funny. So even as a kid, when you're not again watching it like this, because there's no way of discussing what your brain at the age of 6 or 7 is absorbing from that film.
Right.
That really came later when it was on HBO. I think I remember in the late 70s, like 78, winter 78. There was nothing like that. Same thing with Carnal Knowledge. Mike Nichols' Carnal Knowledge was another one that I remember at the same time. I remember seeing it with my mom, and I didn't know what was going on. Again, if it sounded funny, I would laugh. If it sounded dramatic, I would try and understand. I would ask questions. She would tell me. But that film was yanked from so many local theaters, people referring to it as pornography. And I only remember that happening one other time was in 74. Bertrand Blier did Going Places. And that was another one where it just went way, way too far for some people. And there was, I remember even the evening on HBO, that stigma never left. When Going Places was on HBO, I think it's the same thing in 78 or 79. We watched it once. We had seen it in the theater years before, like 5 years earlier.
Right.
But then the second time we went to watch it again with more of the family members were home, so they wanted to watch it. It was replaced. It was pulled from HBO because people complained.
Oh,
that
geez.
And what did they replace it with? This was brilliant. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Win-win. I was like, this is just genius. So these 1974 classics were still causing trouble,
right?
On HBO now. Home box office as opposed to local box office. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But Clockwork Orange. It's a brilliant movie. I can't rate Kubrick either. There's no way. Like Barry Lyndon for a long time, I just thought that was it for me. It went everywhere for me all at once. It was the Wonkavator, it just goes anywhere and lands wherever it has to. But I can't do that anymore. So Clockwork Orange is just like, who the hell else would have ever made that? So again, it's a gift.
Kubrick's one of those ones that it seems like you could ask me every week and I'd have a different answer for which of his films was the most effective for me.
Yeah. The Mood Ring. He's substantial enough. Yep.
I guess my next one, I had to go with my guardian angel here and bring up Mr. Vincent Price and the Abominable Dr. Five.
Absolutely.
Love that movie.
And when did you see that?
Gosh, I think that one was probably very early, like one of those late night showings that they used to double feature of both of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Probably like not quite teens, but like early adolescence.
Right. Yeah, that's another one. 6 years old, 7 years old. Yeah. The second one, I felt bad because there was some great stuff in it. And as I got older, I started noticing that the continuity was just like kind of all over the place. And then of course, I find out Robert Fust, it was taken away from him by Arkoff and chopped to pieces and, tried to, and I'm like, wow, that is a tragedy because the first one was so fun. All his movies are so, and he was a production designer. So he knew how to really convey some difficult humor and difficult, because they're both highly satiric, but there's a lot of great ideas. And there was no reason why that had to be tampered with, he has such a unique style and pace. And of course, you've probably seen the final program. And Devil's Reign, which I think people fight themselves over. That's another thing I can't stand is hearing the guilty pleasure.
I hate that term.
if I did heroin and I thought it was great, then maybe I could call that a guilty pleasure. I don't want that. There's enough in my system to deal with, but that's a guilty pleasure. I have no guilt over any of these things, but yeah,
Right.
I mean, no, it's a beautiful movie, and it's so funny. I remember again, when I was like in second grade at that point, I tried to write a story. I wanted to write. And I was so completely untalented at writing. All I did was basically write what I remembered from Dr. Fives. So I was like, oh, and my mother was called. They were concerned. Did you ever have when you were in first and second grade? You have you'd write something and then they would put I remember the paper clip, these little cards with words that you misspelled.
Oh yeah.
And I had a ton, and they were blood, vampire. I wrote a story called the two vampires, and of course years later I'm that's why I fall in love with Jean Roland. It's that's what I was thinking of.
Right.
Oh yeah. And then Jean Roland you can throw in. Was that what was that one? Was that this one from '71 also was so beautiful? Not Rape of the Vampire. Was it Rape of the Vampire? No. No, it was. Oh my gosh! That year. Please, yeah, it's perfect. Oh my God, this is what happens when you hit this age.
It is taking forever to load. 71 was Shiver of the Vampires, and then. Maybe the one that you saw in 71, the Nude Vampire.
No, that's earlier. After Shiver. What's the
after Shiver is Requiem for a Vampire.
Requiem for a Vampire.
That one is 72.
Was it?
Yeah.
I never knew that. I always thought it was 71. Okay, I'll allow you that.
I guess I'm on my number 10 if we're going through this whole thing. Daughters of Darkness. Beautiful, lovely backgrounds. Such a out there film. The entire thing is just great, and then the climactic struggle is just shot so perfectly. Love that movie.
It's got a great Belgian sense of humor too. It's really he's great. A lot of his films are wonderful. Malpertuis from the next year is really great also. There's two different versions of that. Both of them are really worth seeing. He's brilliant. I actually think he may still be on Facebook. I'm not sure, but he's definitely he's just brilliant.
Wow,
great to listen to. Yeah, cool guy.
We've already talked about this one. Willard is my next one.
Good.
Love Willard. It's such an underrated movie. Not enough people have seen this to be able to talk about it, but the ones that do.
Now it was a blockbuster then.
Right.
I said it was really they called it the Summer of Willard. It was such a huge hit. Now you're right. It's
so weird.
Nobody's seen it.
Right.
Elements never existed for decent. It's the VHS. I think it might have been. You could say it was kind of too late for people to remember that it was a popular movie at one point. Boy, was it popular. It was everywhere for years.
That's wild.
Prince just never left the theaters. They just would stick it with something else over the years. And you'd see it double, triple features. Willard review there. Ben is another one from the next year. And that was just more weird. That was weird because that's Phil Carlson who, did Walking Tall after that. And, he was same producer, Mort Briskin. But I actually did a fan edit of that a long time ago where I cut out all the rats. And I just made it a story about just this invalided kid who has the imagination of Ben and thing. So I have to find that. I don't know if it still exists, but I remember being very proud of that sculpting of the movie because it was in the movie, it was very bizarre. It's so weird. There's a puppet thing goes on there, really strange. And Lee Harcourt Montgomery, a really good actor. There's another really good, but really perversely violent, as all Phil Carlson is for, he's a shocker. But Willard was different. Right? Wasn't that sad? I think Willard was a really sad movie, very tragic movie. Bruce Davidson's just brilliant. I mean, it's nothing, he's great. And also in Ulzana's Raid, the Robert Aldrich Western, which had it's a lot to unpack with that film too, but And he was just really great. But yeah, Willard makes me cry. It's a really sad movie. But yeah, good list.
I happen to have one close to me in physical that was next on my list. Lizard in a Woman's Skin, Fulci. This is one I saw. This is one of the first Fulcis I saw. I think I saw.
Oh, good! Yay, that's good to hear.
I think I saw Don't Torture a Duckling, and then I saw this one, and then I went into the big boys. So yeah.
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, those are, again, that's like his masterpieces, along with Beatrice Cenci. That's really amazing stuff. Yeah, listen to the soundtrack. My God, like this, I don't even know what you call it. The musique concrete. I don't know what that is. It's brilliant Morricone soundtrack. And yeah, that was the one where they were thick. Carlo Rambaldi did the split dogs scene, and then like that, they thought that was real, and there was a lawsuit. And, the first time I met Lucio was in Rome at the Fanta Festival. We were supposed to be showing my film, Original Sins, who I did with Matthew Howe and Kevin Marr was in it. And I saw him. I was coming out of Lizard in a Woman's Skin. They projected again like a pristine print. It wasn't in English, but I had met friends at the festival already who were translating stuff for me. Right. They were happy to do that. They were great. So I had seen that, and there was Lucio in the lobby, and it was crazy. He looked like he was wearing like pajamas. It was the strangest thing ever. I mean, it was very odd. But I was so nervous because I don't go up to my idols. You know, it's hard for me to go up. I'm pretty shy with that. And I went up to him and I introduced myself because he was a juror and my film was it was in competition. So I went up and introduced myself, and then I told him that I just came out of seeing this print. I just said, my God, this is just I can't even tell. I said, I was like, I'm shaking because I wasn't prepared for that emotional response from this particular film. Right. And I was really shaking, and he hadn't said a word to me yet, but he just reaches out and he just hugs me. And he had I guess a girlfriend or a woman with him. It was very sweet, and she was looking at us like, "Aw," like, you know. But it went on for so long. It was like a heartfelt, and that's when I had that we started our unfortunately very brief relationship because he didn't last. He was very severe diabetic, right? And he didn't last more than 2 more years, I think. So it was horrifying, loss. But he was just, to me, a very sweet guy. A brilliant guy, and I don't know. I hear these stories about him, and I just go, "You fucked up. Obviously, something about you fucked it up. You fucked up with him. I don't know." He was a very sweet. He loved his daughter Antonella. They were inseparable, and I loved their relationship. He was losing him so young. I mean, he was in his 60s. I remember I couldn't even call her to give condolences. I couldn't even talk for a long time. He was just someone very special, and he really was supportive. And I can't even describe it. But he was a lot to me. I don't know what stories exist outside of what I know about him, but I don't know. I always treated him like he was my second dad. That kind of relationship. Very brief though, but he was wonderful, and I hope from what I hear he was like that with other people too. I mean, he was just wonderful. But his films are great, and they like we're talking about all these directors. He had passages where they'd be one style and he would change, and no one talks about these great comedies that he did for Franco and Ciccio. I still want to try and get a box set of those.
Please.
They're brilliant. My God. Oh, those secret agents will kill you. That will hospitalize you. There's a 10-minute sequence in those secret agents involving a sunburn and getting out of a unitard bathing suit for 10 minutes. Almost hospitalized me. It's one of the funniest things. It's just brilliant direction. Great direction. Right out of the gate. His first movie as a director, right out of the gate, just solid, technically solid, and does what it's supposed to do. Great musical comedies, great westerns, brutal, way beyond their time. I mean, they're shockers, but they're really good. And even Contraband, I think, is a brilliant movie. I don't even know why that's not considered like what. Maybe now it is. It just came out on, I think, on Blu-ray, right? I mean,
Cauldron.
Underground had it on DVD for a long time, which was thank God. But who put that out?
Cauldron.
Oh, Cauldron. Oh, good.
Yeah.
He's great. I'm glad. Yeah, good mention for sure.
I've got 3 more, and we'll try to go through these quickly, and then we can call it a night. My next one that gets very little love, which I think is way, I don't even know how to like go down this path, but way more intellectual, I guess, than people give some of the other films around that time credit for. The Velvet Vampire.
Oh yeah, great movie.
Love this movie, and so few people talk about it. And I think one of the reasons right now this whole home video sphere, because Scream Factory put out 1,000 copies of it, and that's it. And now nobody else can get it. So.
Oh wow. Okay. I know they were thinking of remaking it at some point a couple of years ago. That they were passing around, but I don't see why they would even.
Interesting.
It wouldn't be the same thing. The movie is so like you say, so unique and dreamlike, and I wouldn't even. Why would I in name only? Why would I want to even check that out unless it's just good on its own? But I mean, as Velvet Vampire, what a unique film, beautiful movie. Yes, I agree with Maddie K. 555. Yes, I would say that and Devil, Towards Darkness, great double. I agree.
Not many comedies on my list, but I had to throw in, and now for something completely different.
Oh, wow.
That was 71.
Yeah. I actually saw that in the theater, too. We didn't know. I don't know if I saw it in 71, though. Was that released in 71 here?
Yeah, the original
one. Huh? Because I don't think Monty Python was on air until like 74 in America. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure. I somehow remember it being on air in like 73.
I'll check.
I haven't, the facts when I was researching it didn't support that. But yeah, I saw that. Talk about no budget. That movie had that, but had what a great stink to that film. Had a really cool, and the theater I saw it
in the States
on TV. Or the movie?
It just says August 22nd of 72 and now for something completely different.
But the TV series, I'm not sure if that was even out yet. That which is weird. But I kind of remember it being on at 73, but I probably am wrong. It was probably 74 by that point. I mean, here in the States, we never experienced anything like them at all. That was totally new. I mean,
something completely different.
Yeah, it really fit its. And it was that movie. I think they were already hoping that the show would end. I think they were on in England for a while at that point, like 69 or something, and they came from different other comedy shows with different, not as blunt as the segues are very blunt.
Right.
And Monty Python. But the shows, it's weird to see them in some of their earlier shows, again, playing against each other, the different, like teams. And it's so like Carol Burnett show. It's like, it's weird, like soft, funny skits, but not so blunt, not so hard. So it's weird if you're really immersed in them first, and then you start seeing where they came from. You're like, oh my God, like they must have been itching to get the hell out. But that's a good one too. That's a weird memory too. I remember seeing that in the same theater where we saw Willy Wonka for the first time, and it was like such a rundown theater. It was like an old bijou, so it had that feel to it, but there was like crap on the floor from like 1929. I mean, it was never cleaned, but that's where I saw that for the first time, that theater where your shoes would stick to the floor. They just never cleaned it. Spilled soda from decades, from the silent era. But it was, Oh, that's a great, good list, my friend. That's a good one.
Last one I had is Duel. Not much said about that, but it's an interesting one. It's about to get a brand new 4K release
Cool.
here in 2 months, and I hope it looks great.
Yeah, I mean that's always amazing movie. I don't. That's one I just don't remember ever being in the theater. I never saw it in the theater. I saw it on TV, and I remember it being a
Right.
big deal. But I never. I don't know if it came out here first in a theater or if that was. I'm pretty
think
sure
it was TV.
I'm pretty sure it was a TV
Yeah.
movie originally, and then they just threw in like a few extra minutes or something like that.
Right.
The dual. I think I haven't seen the TV version, probably since it aired, but I've only seen I guess it's I think it's an expanded version, the theatrical one. Probably had to be, because if it was for TV, it was probably 74 minutes. That was ABC TV's like law. It had to fit into a 90-minute slot, so it was always 74. But another great. Again, all these movies are so. Even if they were like, oh my God, how can I forget this one? The Light at the Edge of the World. Another good friend of mine, late director, so I miss him, was Kevin Billington, who did that. He was another. These guys who made that movie, my God, really? Okay, yeah, Land of Silence. Yeah, Herzog's Land of Silence and Darkness. I agree. Good one. That's another one. Yul Brynner and Kirk Douglas, an outrageously violent, traumatic film. Jules Verne. Oh, great. It's like, let's go. Oh, God, 6 years old. Just traumatized. And that's another one ripe for discussion. But yeah, God, so much in 71.
Literally.
And this is nothing.
Right.
This is handfuls we're talking.
Yeah. This is scratching the surface. There was, I think I was just looking through like historical records. There was one list I found that was 3,500 films long from 71.
Yep. How many now, right? I don't know, a couple of dozen. I don't know how many. Do we even crack 100 anymore?
Oh,
America?
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We still get around 300 that are even that are ran theatrically even. So,
well, all right, but they're not all memorable like the ones we got. I don't know what's happening. I mean, I guess they just have to be seen.
How do you feel about the last movie, the Dennis Hopper, 1971?
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
wonderful. I again. Intention? Who the hell knows? But again, it's one of those movies that always made sense to me. It seemed I watch it, made sense the first time I saw it, and I know people who were actually trying to do a legitimate reconstruction of that, a chronological reconstruction of it, the way it actually was intended to be chronological. It wasn't, it really was supposed to be, film that made more conventional sense, but but they never did it. I guess it was, again, it's Universal. They would have, I think Universal just put the kibosh on it.
Right.
They didn't do it, but it was a great idea, and I was I had seen a lot of the stuff they were doing for it. That would have been really cool. But great movie. I love early Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, and Dennis has gotten a lot of love on physical media over the last few years, which is so
Out of the Blue.
Nice to see.
Which I think he took over. Out of the Blue was with Joyce Chopra, I think, originally.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I know the extras in that disc are phenomenal. I want to go through that again. I was been in a haze. I didn't have time to. Well, I didn't have time to watch everything, but I love everybody who worked on that disc. I love Linda Mance, and I just think, yep. Blood on Satan's Claw. That's a cool movie. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was really wonderful. When I was in England, screening, a work in progress screening of my Joe Meek documentary back in, I don't know, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was invited. This was like the greatest night of my life. I was invited to a birthday dinner for an editor, Noreen Ackland. And I heard the name and I'm like, are you kidding me? She said, like, oh, you've heard of Noreen? So she edited Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. And they're like, she did. And I said, and she worked for him for quite a few years as an assistant editor. She did. She'd love to meet you. So I went and they seated me next to her. Of course, she had all her friends there, but no, they seated me next to her. And she was like, in her maybe her late 80s at the time, which again now it's like the new 40s, but she was she's bent over and whatever. And I was talking with her. She couldn't believe that I knew who she was, and that I knew who she was. I was ready. I told her, I'm like ready to propose marriage to you. That I don't know what this is. I said, I know. And the thing was, she was married to an ironically named Richard Best, who was really one of the best editors in England. And there's a lot of great editors. He was brilliant, very eclectic, and he did Blood on Satan's Claw. And I think the Dam Busters also. And I was telling this, and she's just looking at me like, she was, yes, he was a wonderful editor. How do you know that? It's like she was like so like suddenly like, wow, like yeah, I'm so proud. I was so proud of him, but he passed away. And I go, well, not lucky for him, but maybe lucky for me. And I just like took her hand, and she's like, "Oh, you're wicked. You're just like Mickey, like Michael Powell."
Right.
He was very wicked. You're very wicked. And I'm like, "No, I mean it. I want to marry you." I was like, "Please, I don't know what to say." So that was great. But yeah, but Richard Best, my God, talk about taking things for granted. People's jobs. And like, these are jobs. It's like how you unscrew their brain, and you're just getting their brain out. All these brains just leaking all over the screen. Wild. It's just wild, Yeah, I mean, untapped genius everywhere. It's just people have to have the proper exposure to it. Not everybody can afford all these things, and that's also kind of a sad thing, but I like, they're working it in with I guess some streaming places like Shudder but that's genre stuff. There's still so much stuff that, you have to hear about and then decide, that's why boutique labels are really brave. And I know you've probably gone through this every show that's the whole point, is that, it's either just suicide or, thank you, what can you do?
Right.
But you definitely have to thank all these people for trying so hard. And who would have thought now the amount of great stuff being unearthed?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Really,
I mean,
really.
look, tonight we had, I think, like 35, 37 announcements. This is a very slow week right now. 37 announcements is very slow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Wow.
It's an incredible time.
Thank you, sir, for keeping it going.
Well, thank you for coming. I mean, this has been amazing to have just your presence here. Like,
I appreciate that, and everyone who's here, thank you so much. That was great. I like watching. It's too bad. Again, I would like to see your heads pop up and some talking. I would like to see keep up with all the, This is like one of those things. We're gonna have to move this to OnlyFans and do this nude. But thank you, guys. I'm going to say thank you, everybody. And I know a lot of you. So, nice meeting some of you guys for the first time too. Really appreciate it. No, yeah, definitely, DC. I mean, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful. Good to hear some perspective, and it's good to hear that the stuff really gives the esoterica. These were blockbusters back then. Oh, I hope so. Thank you, Sardis. Thank you, Jude McKenna. Look at this.
Everybody is so about
it. So we'll go get ice cream. It's weird, and it's weird for me because I remember a lot of these movies were hits. And time moves on, but you don't think about it. So you start thinking like I sound like my dad or my grandma. Wow. You keep. This is life. It's all perspective, and it's all going to move ahead. But something. Keep up the good work, guys. The labels are just making my heart pump. These are films. I remember seeing a show just recently that you did. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't yours. It was I think Tony Mishas, the imprint. Things, and he did a great show, and it was I think anticipating some of the box sets that I worked on, like the Gene Hackman box set or the Sidney Furie. And again, in my head, all these movies were like my whole life.
Yeah. And
I forget, depending on even where you live, they just weren't other part of other people's lives, and that's how I don't have time to stop and think like that. But they made me. It was very sentimental because they're going like this, march or die. I hear it's okay. I'm like no, it's great. Bite the bullet. I didn't hear. There's not much about this movie. I'm like no, it was a big hit. Like talking to the screen, and it's like wow, no, this is just the truth. My life is not shared. My experiences are not the common shared experience anymore. I mean, I think a lot of the kids that I grew up with, they weren't allowed to go to everything that I was. I was very fortunate, but what an education, it really was. Just keep your mind on fire. But then again, now you get to a point where even though they're coming out, it's sort of wistful because the directors aren't here to see, the casts mainly aren't even here. I had to talk to Robert Wagner a couple, months ago on the Mountain for Imprint. I did a little piece of him, and he's like saying to me, he stopped in the middle and he goes, Paul Barrett, yeah, okay, disconnected convention. Why not? He says to me, and I kind of closed the video essay with him, and he was saying like, Howard, how long ago was this movie? And I go, that's like 70, 75 years ago. He goes, wow, is there anybody left from the cast or crew besides me? And I go, no, I hate to tell you, I really think you're like the last one. He goes, God, is that true? It's like, wow, I can't believe that. And it's like, wow,
yeah,
wow. It's like you take it for granted because it's really weird. But it's not just from him. You start to wonder all these guys, if they're still around, then you think like, all right, they're in their 80s. Well, it's still their 80s. It's not so old anymore to me. I know people in their 80s, and but no,
that's why this home video stuff is so important.
Really is. So it's kind of wistful in a good way, I guess. But it's also like, I'm glad it's there because you can recommend a lot of stuff now. That's at people's fingertips. But I wish we all were able to have a lot of money. So
to bring it full circle, this is Tony Meachus. He's been watching with us all night.
Tony, you're a hero, sir. Thank you.
Tony says, Howard, we must have you on the show sometime soon.
Anytime. It'd be an honor. You guys are great. You just have such a beautiful attitude towards everything. And I think the fact that you stress taking blind buys, blind chances, you have no idea how much respect that I get, because what were we doing as kids? We were just going to everything. Yep. So damn, that makes me, it's the new way of doing that, but there's such a cost, and I understand it's not cheap, but I really, I can't, you're heroes just for the attitudes you have. And the fact that and Ryan's definitely an example of this as well. It's definitely a new day. It's not the same as it was 2 years ago, and that I love. So I thank you so much again, everyone who's been here tonight. Wow, that's just great, and I hope other people, they get to see this in archive. It's great too, because I really want to continue hearing from people. I'm on Facebook, so it's the Howard Esberger. No, I never worked on for KNBFX. No, it's not me. But he's on there too. We have different signifiers. He's Hoops. He's Howard Hoopsberger. I'm Howard Esberger. So,
Howard's Facebook and Instagram are both listed below.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough because if you guys want to friend me, you're going to have to send like I'm maxed out. I have like 5,000 friends. I gotta like go back and find who hasn't talked to me in 8 years, and then I'll get rid of them, and then I'll join you. You can join. But I really want to hear from you guys. You guys are great. You are the sacrificial lambs, my friend, of this era, and you have a lot to enjoy. I gotta tell you, just open your mind. Don't get snotty because you're just going to short sheet your own experience. Keep it positive. Keep an open mind and try everything. Again, Tony, you're great. This is what you've said to people right from the beginning is, this sounds interesting. If these guys are doing it, there's got to be some value to it. Oh, what a beautiful thought. So that's what films were made for. So thank you so much, everybody. It's really, really great. Make my heart beat.
Well, for everybody that's watching this on replay, for everybody that's listening to the podcast version, Howard wants to hear some comments. So leave some comments, messages below, whether it's on YouTube or find him on Facebook or Instagram in the description. He wants to hear from
I'll be on Instagram. You can get me on Instagram. I'm just getting back to it. Hashtag scared the hell out of me. It was too tiring, but I'm going. I'll be there in more full force in the next month or so. There's a lot. Now there's a lot to talk about. Before it's only just so. But Ryan, also, good brain in your head, my friend. Good job. I'm looking forward to a lot of interesting adventures with you. So, welcome everybody to the new blog. It's gonna be the new podcast can be very exciting. So. It'll be very depressing too, but hopefully it'll be, through that cloud we get to the heart of ourselves.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming down the pike, and I really hope people are here for it because there's some interesting stuff coming.
Thank you, guys. Ryan, thank you so much.
Howard, you're amazing. I think this is the first time I've ever had anybody on the show that has explained the time that they hugged Lucio Fulci, and for that, you are one of my heroes.
I hug a lot of these guys if I get the chance. I'm very shy, but boy, if I'm put in the position, I'll go right for the yeah. Eventually, I'll tell you my Dennis Hopper story since you're such a Dennis Hopper fan. Some people are embraced by greatness. I can honestly say I was molested by greatness. So we'll get to that another time.
On that note, that's the hook for the next time Howard's on the show. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Thursday. Can't wait to chat with everybody again. Thanks, Howard. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, guys. Thanks you again.
Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.